3.5 Inequalities involving quadratic functions. Last video for this chapter. It's kind of lengthy. There is a lot of extra work that does go with these. You might find it easier to just take a piece of scratch paper, do some work on scratch paper off to the side as you're testing numbers. You're going to see what I mean when I get to examples 2 and 3. So it might seem like, oh, this isn't that bad. It's kind of short, but there is a lot of work in it. Now, it's not difficult work. It is all review. There's nothing really new here other than you do have to check your answers. So in example 1, which is like number 12 from your quiz, you are given a parabola with a secant line. So we need to remember a secant line is a line that does go through the parabola. It will intersect at 2 points. It's going through it. F of x is your parabola. G of x is your line. We need to talk about some parentheses and brackets things. So please remember, when we're talking equal to, you will be using brackets. When we are not talking equal to, you will be using parentheses. When we see greater than, we are talking about the graph being above something. And when we see less than, we are talking about it being below. So here we see g of x. G of x is the line. So I'm going to write that. Let me change my color actually. G of x is your line. F of x is your parabola. So we want where is the line greater than or equal to, which means above. Where is the line above the parabola? So this is where it gets kind of tricky. If I put highlighter over my parabola, and then I put highlighter on my line, I can look here. If I start on the left side, do you see how the yellow is above the green? Here, the parabola, f of x, is above g of x. Yellow is above green. As I continue to move through each section, there's 3 sections here. Here, the green, g of x, is above the parabola. And on this 3rd section, the f of x, the yellow, is above the g of x, the line. So I'll color code this for you. So the line is green, the parabola is yellow. We want where the green is above the yellow. And if I look here, yellow above green, green above yellow, yellow above green. So this is the piece right here that works for A. That is where green is above yellow. So now I just need to write my solution. It's your x values. Please make sure we remember we are using our x values here. So my left x value, if I look at this point, I have -2. My right x value, when I look at this other point, I have 1. And I'm using brackets because we have greater than or equal to. Now when I move to B, f of x is your parabola. G of x is your line. And it says greater than. So greater than means above. We want f of x to be above g of x. Color coding it, I want yellow above green. There are 2 places where that is happening. Here and here. So the ones that I have outlined in blue. So again, x values. These arrows are going to the left. That is negative, parenthesis, negative infinity. And it is going to the x value here is negative 2. Also parenthesis because it's not equal to. And then this one is starting at 1. The x value is 1. And these arrows are going to the right. So infinity. Those are the two places where yellow is above green. Please don't forget it's the x values that we're talking about here. Okay, that's the easy example. Now it's time for the examples that involve some work. So solving the inequality. Hopefully this won't be so bad because you got a lot of these to do in example 3. So when you're solving an inequality, you do want one side to be 0, strictly 0. So now I see I have an x and an x. I have an x squared and an x. You are going to have to factor. Sorry, those of you who don't like factoring, you're not so strong with factoring, you're going to have to factor. There's no way around it. So I can factor out an x, and I'm left with x squared plus 8. Now, I know I have a greater than 0, but I'm not sure what inequality I'm actually going to be using. So I'm going to set equal to 0. So x equals 0, x plus 8 equals 0. This one's done. This one equals negative 8. So you're going to have two solutions, but now is it going to be greater than, or is it going to be less than? Here's how we go through this. Again, this is very time consuming, and I strongly suggest you just do your scratch work on another piece of paper. Here's 0. Here's negative 8. I'm not worried about this being perfect, you guys. Now to test, you need to pick a value on the left side, in between, and on the right side. So I'm going to test x equals negative 9, x equals negative 1, and x equals 1. Now you have a bunch of options, and that's completely up to you how you want to go through and test. That's you. So you're going to plug these in to the original equation. So I'm going to have negative 9 squared plus 8 times negative 9. And I'm checking to see if it is greater than 0. So I have 81 minus 72. 81 minus 72 gives me 9. Is 9 greater than 0? Yes. That piece worked. So I'm going to highlight here. And I'm going to put an open circle. Why does it get an open circle? Because it's greater than, not equal to. You could go ahead and put an open circle on 0 as well. Now I'm going to test negative 1. So negative 1 squared plus 8 times negative 1. Let's see if this is greater than 0. 1 minus 8 is negative 7. Is that greater than 0? Nope. So I do not highlight the area in between because that did not work. Now I'm going to test positive 1. 1 squared plus 8 times 1. So we're checking to see if this is greater than 0. 1 plus 8 is 9. Is that greater than 0? Yes, it is. So that piece worked. So I'm also going to highlight this piece. So now we're going to write our inequalities for just the pieces that worked. Here, x is less than negative 8, and here x is greater than 0. Those are your solutions. So you do need to test, you guys. There's no way around the testing. You must test points. Again, I would just do that on a separate sheet of paper. Just make sure you remember you have to test values. Now let's go ahead and do this same process in B, but B is a little bit different. B is not equal to 0 yet. So there's a couple things I want to do here. First, I want to distribute, because a lot of you are going to think, oh, it's already factored. It's not, because that left side is factored, but now we're going to move the 20 over. So I'm going to have x squared plus x minus 20 is equal to 0. So you might want to show subtracting 20 if that's something that you guys are going to forget. Now what multiplies to 20? 5 and 4. And how will that give me a 1? It gives me a 1 if I add 5 and I subtract 4. So what will x equal here? Negative 5 and 4 when I change my signs. I'm doing some mental math. Now, I'm going to make my checking line. Here's negative 5. Here's 4. You pick a number on the left, you pick a number in the middle, and you pick a number on the right. So I'm going to pick negative 6, 0, and 5. So just make sure you are picking numbers that fall in those designated areas. Then I'm actually going to plug back into that equation because it's the one that has 0. So negative 6 squared plus negative 6 minus 20 has to be greater than 0. And once you know it is or is not, stop. You do not need to finish like I did in A. This is positive 36 minus 6 minus 20. When I combine those, I get 30 minus 20. Is that greater than 0? I hope that you said yes. So I'm going to go over here to the negative 6 area. Because I got a yes, I'm going to highlight that. And it is an open circle. Why is it an open circle? Good, it's an open circle because it's not equal to. Now I'm going to move on to the next value for testing, which is 0. So 0 squared plus 0 minus 20 is greater than 0. Well, those go away, and I'm left with negative 20 is greater than 0. Heck no, that's not true. Now I'm going to plug in 5. 5 squared plus 5 minus 20, greater than 0. 25 plus 5 is 30, minus 20 is greater than 0. It gives me 10. So I come over here, it's an open circle, and that part was true. So to write my answer, x, because the arrow is pointing to the left, it's less than negative 5. And then because this arrow is pointing to the right, it's greater than 4. So make sure you are using the numbers that your points are on, not the numbers that you plugged in. Alright, I needed a drink of water. Ugh. Okay. Again, it's just a lot of work. It's not difficult work. It's just a lot of it. Now in example 3, whoops, too far. Look at how many of these are in example 3. In example 3, it's not too bad because you have 3 equal signs. You don't have to do sign lines for those, the checking lines. You have to check only when it's an inequality. So for A, it says f of x. Well, here's f of x. So negative x squared plus 1, and I set it equal to 0. Well, I'm going to add x squared. So 1 equals x squared. Because it's a square, I can square root. Just don't forget that you must put plus or minus. So A is done. for B, it's g of x. So this is 4x plus 1 equals 0. Move the 1 over. 4x equals negative 1. Divide by 4. And x equals negative 1/4. Okay, that was easy. Now in C, it says f of x equals g of x. So f of x is negative x squared plus 1. G of x is 4x plus 1. Oh boy, there's multiple x's here. We have an x squared, we have an x. We actually need to make sure that this gets set equal to 0. So I'm going to move the 4x over, and I'm going to move the 1 over. So I get negative x squared minus 4x. Well, the 1's are going to cancel, so it leaves me with 0. Now I'm going to divide everything by negative 1 because I don't want x squared to be negative. So x squared plus 4x equals 0 because I'm solving. If I were graphing, I would leave it as the negative x squared, but I'm solving. It's not a necessity. It's fine the way it is. So I'm going to factor out an x. They both have an x, so I factor it out. And I'm left with x times x plus 4 equals 0. So x will equal 0 and x will equal negative 4. All right. Now, let's move on to the next 3. Now, in the next 3, those should look familiar. D says f of x greater than 0. Well, here we already did f of x equals 0. And what did we get? So I'm going to take this solution. I'm not going to go through this whole process again. I'm going to put that down here. So I know x equals plus or minus 1. So I can jump directly to a sign line. Here's negative 1. Here's 1. So I'm going to test x equals negative 2, x equals 0, and x equals 2. Plug those in. I'm going to plug them into. Now if I replace the equals with the inequality, this is negative x squared plus 1 is greater than 0. So that's what I'm going to be plugging into. So negative was already there, and then it's negative 2 squared plus 1 has to be greater than 0. Do this first. So this is negative 4 plus 1. Is that greater than 0? I hope you're all saying no. Now I'm going to plug in 0. Negative 0 squared plus 1. That goes away. I am left with 1 is greater than 0. Yes. And then 2. Negative 2 squared plus 1 greater than 0. This is negative 4 plus 1. Is that greater than 0? It is not. So the only piece that worked was where 0 was, and that's in between the two values. And because it's not equal to, open circle. So your solution, parenthesis from negative 1 to 1. Now we're done with D. And then we're going to move on to E and F and then G. So same thing with G. E. We've already solved that. This is 4x plus 1 is less than or equal to 0. Now this one is actually a lot easier because it's linear. So there's no second guessing here. I subtract 1. 4x is less than or equal to negative 1. Divide by 4. I've already gone through all of this, so it shouldn't be too difficult. X is less than or equal to negative 1/4. So that one was finished. It did not need a sign line because there's only one solution. It's when you have that x squared that you have to create this line for determining what your solution is. Now in F, we have f of x, so negative x squared plus 1 is greater than g of x, 4x plus 1. So I am going to move the 4x over. And then remember the ones canceled. So negative x squared minus 4x is greater than 0. And then I divided by a negative 1. Now we need to remember when you divide by a negative value, you must flip your inequality. Your sign changes. So x squared plus 4x is less than 0 now. We already factored this. This factored to x and x plus 4. And it gave us x equals 0 and negative 4. So now I'm going to make my line. Here's negative 4. Here's 0. And then get your 3 points to test. Negative 5. Negative 1. And 1. And then now it's just a matter of plugging in. I'm not going to finish this one. You guys have this one in your notes. Because, again, we're just getting a lot on time. We're looking at right now, I cannot read how much time is left. So that way you guys aren't like, oh man, it's the same thing again. Just remember you take these and you're going to plug in here. But now you're checking for if it is less than 0. Less than 0. And then on the final one, we have f of x is greater than or equal to 1. F of x was negative x squared. I don't remember. Plus 1. Is greater than or equal to 1. Well, here, your 1's will cancel. And you're left with negative x squared is greater than or equal to 0. Divide by negative 1. Because you're dividing by a negative, your inequality will switch around. It's still 0. Now I can square root. Now this is just 0. So it's x is less than or equal to 0. But I still need to double check this because it started out as a square. So just because I got one solution does not mean that it is less than or equal to 0. It might be greater than or equal to 0. So we do need to check. But this one is easier to check because you just have one number. So I'm going to pick negative 1 and I'm going to pick positive 1. Now this is a closed circle this time. Why is this one a closed circle when all the others were open? Good, you have the equal to. So that makes it closed. So now I'm going to test. I am going to test into that equation because it has the 0. So if I plug in, and you could even plug into this one because then you don't have the negative there. So let's go ahead and do that one. That's actually probably the best one. So negative 1 squared has to be less than or equal to 0. Now, here, this gives me 1. Is that less than or equal to 0? It is not. Uh-oh, so that side doesn't work. And we had less than as an original solution, so we do need to be careful. Now it's 1 squared is less than or equal to 0, which is still 1. Is 1 less than or equal to 0? No. So neither side worked. So the only number that does work is x equals 0. So again, it's very important that you guys are using the lines and that you are checking values. Please be very careful with your work. It's very easy to make mistakes. If you have any questions, please make sure that you do ask for help in class, please. It is a time-consuming process, all this checking. Again, just do it on another piece of paper. Don't feel like it does need to be in your notebook. I really expect you to be able to do some mental math with some of this. And as soon as you know an answer is yes or no, stop working on it and then move on to something else. Don't make this any harder than it needs to be because it is not difficult stuff. All right, I will see you tomorrow with some questions and hopefully ready to go with some classwork.